Daja Hao, welcome everybody. My name is Eric Herman, and welcome back to our series, What Do You Know About China? Our video series for English-speaking people who wish to know more about Chinese culture and politics. And I'm joined once again by my friend David Xie, the Distinguished Professor of Economics and expert on China. And how are you doing today, David?
Good.
Oh, good.
So far, so good.
So today we wanted to dive into what's been happening lately politically with China. And I first wanted to ask you, David, about this Congress that happened with the Chinese Communist Party last month, and sort of what happened there, and what is the significance of that particular meeting?
Yeah, people all around they observe this Congress say that Xi Jinping got absolute control of power in China. And Political Bureau, 25 members, most of them are Xi choose for his own sake. Mm-hmm. And also the 7 members, the standing committee of the party's bureau, and then 5 of them, or including Xi himself, actually he can control everything. Mm-hmm. So this time he was considered as the leading core. 1 year ago he tried hard to get this to be recognized, and he did that.
So this represents a solidifying of his political power within China.
Yeah, and also this time his thoughts, like called Xi Jinping thoughts, mm-hmm. Has been written into the party chapter.
Yes.
Party charter.
So tell us a little bit about this. So for those of you who don't know, currently in the Chinese Communist Charter, there's something called Mao Zedong thoughts, mm-hmm. That was already enshrined, and now we have Xi Jinping thoughts. So what does this idea mean?
Yeah, actually, when the official explanation for that is only say it's actually China socialism, or socialism with Chinese characteristics in the new era. So it's nothing new. It's just like Deng Xiaoping raised that theory. It's called socialism with Chinese characteristics. And now he only adds new era, new times. So mm-hmm. What's a new era, new times?
Right.
Probably, I guess it's because China's economy now became the number 2, but it could be number 1 in next decade.
Yes.
So in that situation, you could say it's a new era for China, mm-hmm. or some people say 21st century is the China's century.
Right.
So that's why he's called it new era.
Yes.
But I think it means Chinese leaders can talk equally with American leaders. Mm-hmm. So that's what he means. That means in the future, the world fair will be decided between the 2 giants, mm-hmm. United States and China.
Yes.
China will not satisfied with just pursuing or just following the rules. China tried to set the rule with mm-hmm. US, or sometimes even set the rule by himself.
Right. So Xi Jinping gave a rather lengthy speech at the Congress where he set out this vision for Chinese power in the world in the next generation. And as you say, he sees China as being co-equal with the United States in terms of military and economic power. Mm-hmm. What do you think that means for the relationship between China and the United States? Will they still be friendly or not?
Well, it's hardly tell, because when 2 giants get together, sometimes they have to show the muscles, right? So the could be tight tense. The military situation with the new weapons, new strategic, system of defense or some other things. But nowadays, it's most important thing is they focus on North Korea nuclear crisis.
Yes, that's a big issue right now. So what can you report to us on recent developments on that front? Things seem to have calmed down a little bit with the nuclear testing, the missile testing, but that's still a very tense issue. What is happening there? And has some of the pressure that the Trump administration has been bringing to bear on the Chinese government starting to bear fruit, or not so much?
Yeah, not long ago, President Trump gave the speech in United Nations, mm-hmm. and also means that the U.S. would do something, maybe destroy the North Korean leadership. If Kim Jong-un tried to test the new nuclear weapons. Mm-hmm. And since then, we could see in recent situation, 3 aircrafts I mean, the aircraft carriers approach to North Korea. So that makes tense even worse. I mean, the people think there might be a war. And it's a very, I think that a South Korea leader also worry about this situation.
Right.
So this time, I think Donald Trump would talk with South Korea leader about whether it would be a war or not.
Right.
And also we should need negotiate with China. Can you do something more and try to resolve the problem?
Yes.
I think when Trump visit Beijing, he must have a very serious talk with Xi Jinping, not only on the North Korea nuclear crisis, but also some issues like trade and economic cooperation with China.
Yes. Okay. So there's some very big conversations about to happen with. I guess he's already talked to the Prime Minister of Japan, Shinzo Abe, but also the South Korean leader and President Xi. So, do you think there's been some talk about putting pressure on the Chinese government to on the financial system, on the banks, to stop doing business with North Korea? Do you think that is an effective approach to getting Beijing to put pressure on North Korea?
Yeah, that's one of the measures that China can take, and actually doing something to give the pressure on North Korean leaders. And one more thing is, I think if they stop the energy support, like oil and some other fuels, then the North Korean military troops, they can hardly go over the winter, cold winter.
Right.
So and also the coal import has been stopped.
So you believe China has it in its power to get rid of the North Korean government if they want to?
Yeah, if they really serious, take up some measures, then North Korean leaders must do something, and they should obey. But otherwise, Kim Jong-un say nobody can stop him. I mean, if he desperately pursue something, then even Xi Jinping could not convince him.
Yeah. So if it happens that the United States is not able to convince China to take action on North Korea, what is the likelihood that the United States might take unilateral military action against North Korea? Do you see that as a real possibility?
Well, international community that shows attitudes toward this situation. Most people, most nations don't like the possibility of having war. So the best way is probably it's economic control and try to give the pressure on North Korean leaders, and probably they will compromise a little bit, but not just. I don't think that be effective, because for the last 2 decades, people tried all the same, but nothing happened. Yeah. And North Korean leaders became more and more confident, and they have the more and more nuclear tests. Right. So it must be something to be done in this, I think, the critical moment, probably this 1 or 2 months.
Okay. So now, David, you mentioned that economics is also a big point of discussion between the Americans and the Chinese in this upcoming meeting. You may remember during the 2016 election that Donald Trump often mentioned China and said that China is manipulating currency, China has unfair trade practices, and that he was going to do something about that. Do you see evidence that the Trump administration has taken strong measures against China? And if so, how is Beijing responding?
Yeah, there are several cases that with like steel and iron, the dumping in U.S. and some other products. And Donald Trump says that there must be a trade war if China would not narrow the gap, would not let down the surplus. The trade surplus China has for the past 3 years is over 300 billion US dollars. So it's quite big, and it should be reduced. Otherwise, the US would have a trade war.
Right,
of course.
So now, do you see China's economic influence in the world growing? I know there's been all these projects in Africa, infrastructure projects, and it seems that China is really extending its reach economically. Do you see that project is going pretty successfully for China?
Well, it's kind of a grand strategy, so-called. the main purpose is not for economic benefits or gains. It's rather emphasize on a kind of what is it, ally, China's ally with the developing countries. So those developing countries, if they can get economic benefits or some cash even, and then they'll certainly be happy about that. And then China try to make the kind of circle, a strategic circle, to siege US in some way.
Right. So this is enhancing China's soft power and its ability to.
You cannot only call it soft power. It's a culture export or some kind of concept export. But it's even beyond that. It's kind of a military or infrastructure development expansion of China.
Right. And this is part of its strategy to become a rival power to the United States militarily and economically. Now, at the same time, we see China continuing its development of military bases in the South China Sea, and strengthening its hold on Hong Kong, and sending out signals that it's possibly threatening Taiwan as well. Do you think that China is going to continue to expand militarily and possibly confront Taiwan even in the near future?
There are some possibility because Xi Jinping promised China would be whatever the foreign countries that took away, it should be returned at the moment. And so that's why he's so-called Chinese dream. That means, it's kind of the reorganization of the ancient China Empire.
Right.
So in that case, China could show its attitudes, strong attitudes towards Taiwan issue and other issues in South China Sea. And
what does the Chinese public in general think about that issue? Are they do they strongly support the One China policy and believe that Taiwan should be part of the nation? Or what do you think the general public feeling on that issue is?
Yeah, that's propaganda to always Chinese people. If you ask any average Chinese in the street, they will say, "Oh, Taiwan is part of China. We cannot recognize the independence of it." So anyone who declare Taiwan's independence then should evoke the war. But U.S. would not just wait and see, and I think U.S. should do something. And so now. I think the first issue is North Korean nuclear crisis. The second one probably is Taiwan issue.
Right.
Or South China Sea issue.
Okay. So now with South Korea and Japan, obviously they're exposed as well with North Korea. Do you see there being a danger that there's going to be some nuclear proliferation, that those countries are going to say that we need to have nuclear weapons as well to defend ourselves? Is that a real possibility?
Yeah, I think the North Korean, if not they have any kind of compromise, that gave the reason to Japan to be normalized for his military forces, defense, and also they have the excuse to develop the nuclear weapons. Actually, they have the technology already. They can do it anyway. I mean, they can complete it within very short time. For say a few months, they can complete it.
Okay. So, well, this is a little bit off topic, but it's related. So I've been reading a little bit about World War II history and really the horrible war that was fought between Japan and China in the 1930s when Japan really invaded China. And that some pretty horrible atrocities were committed, particularly at Nanjing, where hundreds of thousands of Chinese were killed. Is there today a real lingering hostility between the Chinese and Japanese people?
Yeah, for Chinese young people, the propaganda told the young people should remember it forever, never forgive the Japanese invaders. And in Japan, of course, they have kind of the rethinking about that past. But most people, I think the Japanese like a peace. In the textbooks, they told the students, we have the history of invasion. Yet, still some different opinions say they exaggerated Nanking's massacres population and something. So, yeah, I think in general, there's too much hatred among Chinese young people, or even for several generations for Japanese. I think it's irrational because there's no reason for one nation has a hatred for another. You say that some people, the invaders, they did the crime, yet those people passed away. So if we cannot build a new relationship, we can't have a peaceful future, then that's a totally a loss for the country. It's not only for this country or the other country, it's for two countries, they lost their future.
Right. Now moving out to the western part of China, Xinjiang, there's an ongoing political issue there as well, as the Han Chinese population is gradually migrating out there, and the Chinese government is really cracking down, from what I understand, on the local Uyghur population.
Yes.
Can you update us a little bit on that situation, and how, do you see the things as being still very tense in that part of China?
Yeah, it's a long history. In Qing Dynasty, Uyghurs are peaceful with Hans, but of course there's some wars, sometimes from time to time, but in general it's good. And because that time there's very few people, Han people, live in that area, region. But since 1950s, there's so many Hans moved to that region. That means now Han has more population than Uyghurs. So that's kind of conflicts. You can never stop. And I mean, Xinjiang, the Uyghurs think that it's their own land, but now was invaded by Hans. But Hans say it's a part of China. So there's some historical issues. And then the central government, they didn't want to compromise. They don't give them the real autonomy. They just say, if you don't obey, if you try to rebel, then we just crack down and we'll kill them. And then they cut off sometime internet. So people, I mean, Uyghurs, they don't have their effective way to communicate with the outside world. Even internet, they don't have the access. They don't have the phone, can call to other places. So that means it's so difficult for Uyghurs, and they don't even have the passports. If they will try to leave China, they have no way. And if they go to Shanghai and Beijing, they try to live in a hotel. Then people say, oh, you are Uyghurs. No, you are not allowed to live in this hotel. That means you have to try find some other places. But even nobody there to accept this kind of person. So that means there's no place to stay. And they were actually discriminated in China nowadays.
Really?
The Uyghurs were considered as terrorists. I think the terrorists might be very few groups of people, but not so many, the few population. But wherever they go, they were treated like the terrorists.
There's been a few instances, for instance, the train station in Kunming in 2014. But
yeah, but for that one, Uyghurs does not recognize or admit that they said probably some other people did.
Right.
Yeah.
So okay, so just to wrap things up on this American trip to East Asia. So from the American perspective, what do you think the best outcome is here for Donald Trump in meeting with the Asian leaders and with Xi Jinping? What is he looking to get out of this trip?
I think his trip is to ensure those allies that the U.S. still, as usual, to defend them, and if there's anything happen, and then also tell China we should have a better partnership rather than enemies. And for instance, for economic relations and all the trade, we could do it better. And for nuclear weapons and nuclear crisis, China should do more to give pressure on North Korea. Otherwise, U.S. will take some action, and that action, the outcome would not be beneficial either for North Korea or China.
Right. Okay. Great. Well, thank you so much, David Xie, for your wisdom and knowledge, and thank you very much for watching this latest episode of What Do You Know About China?
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.